Our next speaker is going to be talking on behalf of Project 1907. We'll give you a little bit of a background here. In 1907, an anti-immigration rally exploded into 3 days of violence and vandalism in Vancouver's Chinatown. This included banners labeling Canada as a white Canada, and it became known as the anti-Asian riots. And that kind of worked to change the course of a lot of our race relations here in the country. The riots led to discoveries of Chinese organizations, including cultural organizations that had aspects that were banned. This was one of the vehicles used to portray Chinese Canadians as a threat to Canada, and to organize efforts of Oriental exclusion, most significantly impacting South Asian and East Asian communities. To this day, anti-immigrant sentiment and discrimination enforcements are continuing to lead to unequal and harmful outcomes for racialized communities. And this is all because of a cycle of racism and discrimination. Project 1907 aims to create safe spaces and healing by recognizing and reclaiming and reframing histories so that all Canadians can better understand how we got here and what path forwards could be. So Ellen, thank you so much. I know you have a presentation for us today. You have co-host authority. Please go ahead.
Hello, thank you very much. Okay, let's see if we can make this work. Can folks see the screen?
Yes.
Perfect. All right. So quickly, I just want to also acknowledge that I am joining today's call from the stolen lands of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples. I want to echo the thanks to Elder Nolan for his welcome and for opening up the event in a really beautiful way. As Yusuf mentioned, my name is Ellen. I'm an organizer with Project 1907, and our name is in reference to the anti-Asian riots that were just spoken about. This is actually really important because in order to understand how Asian people are being treated today, we really need to understand how they were treated throughout history. And thank you, MP Jenny Kwan, for also emphasizing this, that anti-Asian racism did not start with COVID-19. We know that the nation of Canada has been built on a foundation of white supremacy and that there is a long history of racist policy targeting and mistreating Asian bodies. So it's very important that the incidents and experiences of anti-Asian racism that we hear about, that we speak about, the things we see in the news, that we don't isolate them or consider them as separate from this larger history of racism. In response to the pandemic, and in response to the elevated levels of violence that we ourselves were experiencing as a group of Asian women, Project 1907 started collecting self-reported and witness-reported incidents of anti-Asian racism and xenophobia in Canada in early 2020. The Chinese Canadian National Council Toronto chapter also started a similar initiative, and we brought our data together and launched our second national report, which identifies, some key trends, patterns, and calls to action for governments, school boards, and allies. This was a very grassroots effort, community-led, in partnership with 6 other community organizations from across Canada, and it was fully funded through donations and crowdfunding. I want to note that this is community collected data, not police data. In fact, our data indicates that 71% of people who reported their incidents to us did not report their incidents to other institutions, including the police. So this is a different perspective, and I encourage you to all read and engage with the report. Once I'm finished speaking, I'll share the link in the chat to that. So I'm going to provide some highlights of what we learned in 2021. We received a total of 943 reports of anti-Asian racism. This represents a 47% increase in reports compared to 2020. We received reports from every province and territory across the country. Women are overrepresented and continue to submit the majority of incidents. This has been a trend that has been very consistent from the very beginning, and has also been observed by partner organizations doing similar work in other countries, including in the US and Australia. Reports by people of other marginalized gender identities and expressions also all increased. Only reports by men decreased. The intersection of racism and sexism creates a unique vulnerability to violence, and we really need to acknowledge this in our solutions. East Asians continue to report the highest number of incidents, but alarmingly, and also not surprisingly, the number of reports by Southeast Asian and South Asian community members has increased significantly. We know that many of us are working under exploitative labor conditions, and we are systemically overrepresented in precarious, low-wage frontline roles. So we have already been working under dangerous conditions and have now been disproportionately impacted by the negative impacts of racism and the COVID-19 pandemic. Reports of incidents occurring online increased by 132% compared to 2020. And I know we're going to hear from Moonshot a little bit later, but they also tracked a significant increase in hate speech across both fringe and more widely accessed social media platforms directed at Asian American and Pacific Islander communities, both in the US and Canada. Most incidents continue to occur in public spaces, which is also very alarming. So 48% came from that. And also very scary, reports by children and adolescents have increased by 286%. So this is an issue that is not impacting just us in present day, but is rolling over to our children, adolescents, and youth. And we really need to seriously think about the impacts on that generation and what that means for the years ahead. Verbal harassment continues to be the most reported form of discrimination, while reports of shunning also increased significantly, and reports of assault, being coughed at or spat on, increased by 42%. Something new this year is data on perpetrators and offenders, which is subjective and based on the interpretations of the individuals completing the reporting forms. So nearly 75% of submissions reported the offenders or perpetrators as men and white. We need to be mindful about the ways we speak about this, but it's also important that this information, while imprecise, does not substantiate the common claim and harmful rhetoric that Black people are the primary offenders of anti-Asian violence. So we need to ensure that we do not perpetrate anti-Blackness in our advocacy. The report also includes a number of calls to action to governments, to policymakers, to folks working in education, and to allies. So I will leave these for you to read. Something I'll note for policymakers is we're calling on you to recognize the full breadth of settler Asian identities and ensuring meaningful and equitable participation by a wide range of us in consultations on issues of anti-Asian racism. This includes youth, adoptees, seniors, people with disabilities, caregivers, care workers, community members of all racial backgrounds in the Asian diaspora, because I also know that in this conversation, East Asian voices are often centered, and we need to expand beyond that. We're calling for investments in systemic interventions for eliminating all forms of racism. That includes adopting a mandatory anti-racism course requirement for teacher education programs at all Canadian universities. And to all of those who wish to be in allyship, we're calling for self-reflection and dialogues such as this one on how you have been complicit in perpetuating violence against Asian people, how you continue to benefit from systems that harm us and exploit our labor. And we really ask you to think about what you will do within your spheres of influence to repair harm and shift power. I want to note that in the report, we ask the community what they would like to see. Number one is greater public education. Number two is collective action. And number three is policy reform. 0% want consequences for the offending persons, businesses, or entities. So it's very important to us and the folks that were involved in writing this report that this report, the stories in it, the information emerging from it, is not used as a vehicle to advocate for pro-carceral solutions. I'll leave it there. I will provide the link to the report in the chat. And I want to say thank you as well to everyone here, and thank you to Foundation for a Path Forward for bringing us all here together.
Thank you, Ellen. We'll make sure to share the report and the resources with everyone in an email at the end of today's event so that all stakeholders have access to it. Again, one of the key things that I think is noticed is the breakdown of suggestions based on an evidence-based approach. And I will say that it's amazing how the community as a whole isn't looking to blame or shame, but to have actionable items to move forward on this and to change the systemic nature of racism within Canada, either at the educational, the governmental, or the personal level. That's important. And having those statistics and informations to back it up is what's needed in order to advance this change. So thank you so much for the work you and Project 1907 are doing. Always a pleasure, Ellen. Thank you.